The night Olivia Carter walked into the Ashford Gala, she didn't know the man who would kiss her before hundreds of cameras would also destroy the empire that tried to break her. The late afternoon sun poured through the gauzy curtains of Olivia Carter's apartment, painting the small living room in a wash of gold. The light caught the edges of unfinished canvases propped against the wall. Each one a story paused midway, brushstrokes frozen in hesitation. Her easel stood near the window, a smear of cobalt blue drying on the palette beside it. The air smelled faintly of turpentine and lavender, the scent of a woman trying to reclaim her peace one color at a time. On the coffee table lay a heavy cream envelope, its edges embossed with the crest of the Ashford family, a symbol she had once dreamed would become part of her life. She had opened it hours ago, but the words still sat like lead in her chest. The honor of your presence is requested at the Ashford family gala. It was written in the kind of elegant cursive that hid daggers beneath its grace. She had almost thrown it away the moment she saw it. Almost. But then she'd noticed the handwritten note at the bottom, written in a slanted, confident hand she knew too well. Let's show them we can be civil. Derek. Civil. The word itself made her laugh, though there was no humor in the sound. Derek Ashford had always known how to make his cruelty sound like courtesy. 6 months had passed since their engagement ended in quiet devastation. A phone call, a press statement, and silence. He had replaced her with ambition, traded her laughter for status, and yet somehow he still found ways to haunt her peace. Olivia sat on the edge of her couch, the invitation in one hand and a cup of cold coffee in the other. She traced her fingertip along the gold trim of the card. Civil. Was that what he truly wanted? Or was this another of his carefully crafted performances, an opportunity to remind everyone that he had moved on, that she had been nothing more than a misstep in his otherwise flawless life? Her chest tightened, and she set the cup down before her trembling hand could betray her. A voice inside her whispered, "Don't go." But another voice, quieter, steadier, answered, "You must." She stood and walked to the mirror by her dresser. The woman reflected there wasn't the same Olivia who had once stood at Derek's side, beaming beneath crystal chandeliers and the eyes of society. That Olivia had worn soft curls and designer gowns, her confidence borrowed from the man holding her hand. This Olivia was different, her hair tied loosely in a bun, paint flecks on her fingers, strength stitched together from solitude and small victories. She picked up the invitation again. Maybe this wasn't about Derek. Maybe this was about her, about walking into that ballroom and proving, to him, to them, to herself, that she had survived. Still, doubt curled in her stomach like smoke. Derek's charm was legendary, his cruelty disguised as elegance. He could ruin someone with a smile and make them thank him for it. She knew the game he played. And if he had sent this invitation, it was because he wanted something. The clock ticked softly behind her, each second pulling her closer to a decision. The golden light dimmed, shadows stretching across the room, and Olivia's eyes fell to her favorite painting, a half-finished depiction of a night sky over calm waters. The stars were faint outlines, waiting to be filled in. She exhaled slowly. "You can do this," she murmured, almost to the reflection of her unfinished self. She set the invitation on the table, next to her brushes. Tomorrow, she would RSVP, yes. For now, she reached for her palette knife, dipped it in shimmering white paint, and touched it gently to the canvas. A single star came to life amid the darkness, small, fragile, but burning. What she didn't know, what she couldn't yet see, was that Derek's invitation was no olive branch. It was bait. And somewhere across the city, as the last light faded from the skyline, Derek Ashford poured himself a glass of scotch and smiled, a smile that never reached his eyes. "Let's show them we can be civil," he repeated to himself. His reflection in the glass smirked back. Let's show them who she really is. The game had begun, and Olivia, unknowingly, had already accepted her role. The night of the Ashford Gala arrived wrapped in mist and music. The city shimmered beneath the glow of street lamps, as if holding its breath for the spectacle about to unfold. Limousines glided through the wrought iron gates of the Ashford estate, headlights slicing through the fog. The mansion loomed like a monument to wealth, columns bathed in golden light, marble steps polished to perfection, and crystal chandeliers visible even from the courtyard. Olivia Carter's taxi pulled up to the curb, humble and quiet among the parade of black luxury cars. For a heartbeat, she considered asking the driver to turn around, but then she saw her reflection in the window, poised, composed, her emerald green gown catching the faint glimmer of light. She looked nothing like the woman Derek had left behind. She looked like someone who had survived. She paid the driver, straightened her shoulders, and stepped out. The cool air nipped at her skin, and the distant hum of violins floated through the grand entrance. Every step Tao. Or those marble stairs felt like stepping into a past life she had sworn never to revisit. Inside the ballroom was a cathedral of opulence, gold leaf ceilings, silver trays of champagne, laughter that never reached the eyes. Conversations paused as Olivia entered, and for a moment the entire room seemed to inhale. Faces she half remembered turned toward her, society wives, investors, heirs, all dressed in elegance and judgment. Whispers followed her like perfume. She came? After what happened? Brave or foolish? Olivia smiled faintly, her heart pounding. She moved toward the refreshment table, pretending not to hear, her every step a silent defiance. And then she saw him. Derek Ashford stood across the room, framed by the golden light of the chandeliers. His tuxedo fit him perfectly, his charm hung around him like an expensive cologne. He was laughing with a group of businessmen, one hand resting casually on the shoulder of a young socialite who leaned too close. When his eyes found Olivia, the laughter didn't falter, but his smile sharpened. He excused himself smoothly and crossed the floor toward her, every movement rehearsed. Olivia could feel the stares gathering around them. "Olivia," he said, voice warm enough to melt steel, "you look radiant." "Derek," her tone was polite, distant, careful. "Thank you for inviting me." "Of course." He leaned in slightly. "I wanted tonight to be a sign of growth. Closure, if you will. You've always valued grace." There was a knife hidden in that word, grace, and she felt it slide between her ribs. Still, she smiled. "I hope we both find it." He tilted his head, studying her as if she were a painting in an auction. "You know, I wasn't sure you'd come. Most women would have preferred to disappear. I'm not most women." "No," he said softly, his smile turning thin. "You never were." Before she could reply, a waiter approached, whispering something to Derek. He nodded curtly, his gaze lingering on Olivia. "Stay close," he said. "There's something you'll want to hear." He disappeared toward the stage at the far end of the room, where a string quartet finished their final notes. A murmur of anticipation rippled through the guests as Derek took the microphone. "Good evening, ladies and gentlemen," his voice boomed, confident and velvety. "Thank you all for joining us tonight to celebrate not just the success of the Ashford Group, but the beauty of second chances." Olivia's stomach tightened. The way he said it, second chances, felt like bait. He continued, eyes scanning the crowd. "Many of you know I've made mistakes. The kind that come from trusting the wrong people or believing that love can make up for lack of refinement." Laughter rippled through the audience. Olivia's pulse quickened. "She was a lovely woman," Derek said, locking eyes with her. "Sweet, naive, but terribly unprepared for the world we live in. I mistook her simplicity for sincerity. A foolish mistake, but one I've learned from." A sharp sound escaped her throat before she could stop it, a tiny gasp swallowed by the crowd's amusement. The walls seemed to close in, the chandeliers blurring above her. She could feel every gaze burning into her, dissecting her humiliation. Derek had planned to. His perfectly, every word chosen, every smile choreographed. He wasn't offering closure, he was performing her downfall. But while the laughter swelled, something unexpected happened. From across the room, a man at the bar lowered his glass. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes, dark, steady, fierce, locked onto Derek like a hunter sighting prey. He wasn't dressed like the others. His black suit was tailored, yes, but understated. No bow tie, no vanity, just quiet authority. He set his drink down with deliberate calm and began walking forward. Guests parted instinctively as he moved through them, the murmurs fading into stunned silence. The quartet stopped playing. Even Derek hesitated, confusion flickering across his face as the stranger mounted the stage steps. "I apologize for interrupting," the man said, voice deep, controlled, echoing across the hall. "But I can't stand by and watch this charade any longer." Olivia's breath caught. The stranger turned his gaze to Derek. "You speak of maturity and growth," he said evenly, "but I see neither. What I see is a man so desperate to feel superior, he must humiliate someone who once cared for him." A collective gasp rippled through the ballroom. Phones began to rise discreetly, recording. Derek's mask cracked, the charming smile faltering. "And who," Derek demanded, voice hard, "do you think you are?" The stranger's lips curved in the faintest smile. "Julian Harrington." The name sent a shockwave through the crowd. Whispers erupted. Olivia recognized it instantly. The Julian Harrington, the reclusive tech magnate who'd built an empire without inheritance, the man who had once turned down the Ashford family's investment. Julian's gaze shifted to Olivia, his tone softening. "You deserve better than this," he said gently, meant only for her. Then before anyone could react, he stepped closer, cupped her face in his hands, and kissed her. It wasn't a desperate kiss or a scandalous one. It was a declaration, a defense, a spark that set the entire ballroom ablaze with shock. Glasses shattered, gasps filled the air. And in that suspended moment, as Derek's fury boiled behind them and the crowd murmured in disbelief, Olivia's humiliation transformed into something else entirely: power. For the first time in months, she wasn't the woman Derek had left behind. She was the woman someone had chosen to stand up for. What she didn't yet know was that this stranger's defiance would ignite a storm, one that would change both of their lives forever. The ballroom descended into chaos. 1,000 crystal reflections scattered from the chandeliers like the aftermath of a storm, voices rising in disbelief, camera flashes bursting like lightning. The air itself seemed to thrum with shock. Olivia Carter stood frozen, her mind caught between humiliation and wonder. Julian Harrington's lips still lingered faintly against hers, warm, steady, unhurried, as if the entire room hadn't just witnessed the impossible. He had kissed her. Not out of impulse, not out of pity. It felt like protection, an act of defiance delivered with the elegance of a man who feared nothing. Derek's voice sliced through the stunned silence. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" His fury cracked the composure he'd worn like armor all evening. Guests stepped back instinctively as the charming heir's mask began to crumble. Julian turned slowly, releasing Olivia, but staying close enough that she could still feel the gravity of his presence. His eyes met Derek's with unnerving calm. "I'm doing what decent men do when they see cruelty parading as sophistication." Gasps rippled through the crowd again. Someone whispered, "That's Julian Harrington, the billionaire." Another voice followed. "He's challenging Derek. In front of everyone." Derek descended the sudden. Teague stairs, each step a stomp of wounded pride. His smile was gone now, replaced by a glint of disbelief and danger. "You come into my home," he said through clenched teeth. "You embarrass my family and you—" He gestured sharply at Olivia. "Insert yourself into something that doesn't concern you." "It concerns me when a man publicly humiliates a woman for sport," Julian replied, his voice measured but carrying the kind of authority that silenced the entire ballroom. "You call it civility, I call it cowardice." The murmuring intensified. Phones were now fully out, recording, streaming, capturing every second of the confrontation that would be tomorrow's headline. Olivia's heart pounded as she looked around. Faces that had been amused by her shame now watched with uneasy fascination. Derek's power, the fear he wielded, was unraveling right before them. Rebecca Ashford, Derek's mother, appeared at the edge of the commotion, her diamond necklace catching the light like a serpent's scales. "Gentlemen," she said smoothly, though her tone carried the weight of command, "let's not turn this evening into a spectacle." "It already is," Julian said softly, but the steel in his voice made her flinch. "Your son ensured that the moment he decided to mock the woman he once claimed to love." Derek's eyes burned. "You think you're some kind of hero?" Julian's jaw tightened. "No, I just refuse to be silent in a room full of people who think cruelty is entertainment." And then, without another word, he took Olivia's hand. His grip was firm but gentle, a silent question. "Do you trust me?" She didn't answer with words. She simply nodded. The crowd parted for them as they walked toward the exit, the marble floor echoing beneath their steps. The music had stopped, replaced by whispers and disbelief. Derek's furious voice followed them down the corridor. "You'll regret this, Harrington. You have no idea who you're dealing with." Julian didn't look back. "I know exactly who I'm dealing with," he said, his tone calm but cutting. "A man terrified of being forgotten." Outside, the night air hit like liberation. Olivia inhaled sharply, tasting rain on the wind. The mansion's golden lights burned behind them, fading into a blur as they reached the circular drive. Julian finally stopped, turning to face her beneath the marble portico. For the first time since the kiss, their eyes met fully. His gaze wasn't triumphant, it was steady, searching, almost apologetic. "I'm sorry if I overstepped," he said quietly, "but I couldn't watch him do that to you." Olivia's voice trembled, a fragile whisper. "You don't even know me." "No," Julian admitted, "but I know what it feels like to be humiliated by someone you once trusted." He paused, the memory flickering briefly in his expression. And I know that silence in moments like that gives power to the wrong people. Thunder rolled faintly in the distance, as if the sky itself echoed the tension between them. Before she could speak, the mansion doors burst open again. Derek stormed out, flanked by his mother and two security guards. His tie was undone, his composure shattered. "This isn't over," he snarled. "You think you can waltz into my world and play savior? You'll regret crossing me, Harrington." Julian stepped forward slightly, shielding Olivia with his body, not aggressively, but instinctively. "You mistake me for someone who plays your kind of games," he said. "I don't." Rebecca's voice dripped venom. "Mr. Harrington, our family has influence that far exceeds whatever tech company you run. Be careful whom you choose to provoke." Julian's smile was almost gentle. Power built on intimidation is the easiest to break. Olivia's breath hitched. She had never seen anyone stand up to the Ashfords before, certainly not in their own courtyard. Rebecca sneered. "And you, Miss Carter?" Her tone turned razor sharp. "I always said you'd drag our name into scandal. I suppose this is your revenge. Trading G1 wealthy man for another?" Olivia's composure finally fractured, but before she could answer, Julian did it for her. "You mistake dignity for revenge," he said, his voice now low and dangerous. "She didn't create this scandal, you did. Every sneer, every lie, every cruel word, you built this moment yourselves." Derek's fists clenched, his voice rising. "Get off my property Before you what?" Julian interrupted smoothly. "Show them all exactly who you are?" For the first time in his life, Derek Ashford was speechless. The silence that followed was suffocating, broken only by the faint rumble of approaching thunder. Julian turned to Olivia again. "Come with me," he said softly. "You don't have to face this alone." Something in his tone, firm yet kind, broke through her fear. She nodded again. They walked toward a sleek black car parked at the end of the drive. Derek's shouts echoed behind them, his threats swallowed by the rain. But Olivia didn't turn back. Not once. Inside the car, the city lights flickered past the window like stars scattered across the darkness. Olivia's hands trembled in her lap. Julian glanced at her, his expression unreadable but gentle. "You did nothing wrong," he said quietly. "Don't let him make you believe otherwise." For the first time that night, tears slipped down her cheeks, not from shame, but release. Outside, the storm finally broke, rain hammering against the glass like applause. Olivia Carter didn't know it yet, but tonight, the night she thought would destroy her, was the night her new story began. And beside her sat the man who would change everything. The rain had turned from drizzle to downpour by the time Julian's car merged onto the quiet stretch of highway that led away from the Ashford estate. Lightning flickered through the clouds, illuminating the sleek interior for brief electric seconds. Olivia sat silently in the passenger seat, her hands folded tightly in her lap. Her pulse still hadn't slowed from the chaos she'd left behind. Every few miles, she caught herself glancing at Julian, the man who had just kissed her in front of half the city's elite. He drove with quiet focus, the storm reflected in his dark eyes. There was a strength in him that wasn't loud, wasn't showy. It was the kind born of surviving something shattering. Finally, he spoke. "Are you all right?" Olivia exhaled shakily. "I don't even know. Everything feels unreal." He nodded, keeping his gaze on the wet road. "That's normal after humiliation. It hits like a storm. You can't believe it happened, and yet every word still echoes." She turned toward him. "You've been through this before, haven't you?" Julian's jaw tightened, but he didn't look away from the road. "Yes," he said quietly, "and I remember every moment of it." They drove in silence for another minute before he turned off onto a side street lined with old brick buildings. The car stopped outside a small cafe with fogged windows and a glowing open sign. "Come inside," he said. "We'll dry off, get something warm, and then I'll take you wherever you want to go." Olivia hesitated, then nodded. Something about his voice, steady, calm, unhurried, cut through the storm in her chest. Inside, the cafe was nearly empty. The air smelled of roasted coffee and rain-soaked streets. A single barista wiped the counter, glancing curiously at the elegant couple entering in their evening clothes. Julian ordered coffee for himself and chamomile tea for her without asking. When the drinks arrived, he guided her to a corner booth away from the windows. For a while they just sat there, the sound of rain tapping against the glass like a heartbeat. Finally, Julian spoke again. "You're not the first person Derek has tried to destroy," he said quietly. Olivia frowned. "What do you mean?" Julian leaned back, his expression shadowed by memory. "Your ex-fiancé's family runs their empire on image. Control through perception. They invest in people the way they invest in companies. If you don't fit their narrative, they erase you. I know because they tried to do the same to me. Olivia stared, stunned. You and Derek? He gave a small, humorless smile. Years ago, before my company took off, the Ashfords wanted to buy a controlling share. They made a generous offer, but it came with conditions. Creative control, influence over my board, branding me as their protege. I refused. A week later, a tabloid ran a story claiming I'd stolen intellectual property, fake witnesses, forged documents. It nearly ended my career. Olivia's eyes widened. Derek's family planted that? Rebecca Ashford specifically, he said, voice steady. She runs that family like a corporation. Derek's just her reflection, polished, heartless, and convinced the world exists to serve him. Olivia's hands tightened around her cup. And tonight? Julian met her gaze. Tonight was about reminding them they don't own everyone. For a moment, neither spoke. The rain eased, softening to a steady rhythm. Olivia looked down at her tea, the steam curling between her fingers. I spent years thinking I wasn't enough for him, she whispered. That if I just tried harder, spoke softer, smiled more, maybe I could belong in his world. Julian shook his head. You never belonged in his world because his world is built on pretense. Yours is built on truth. She looked up, eyes glistening. How do you sound so sure? Because I saw you stand there tonight, he said simply. You didn't run, you didn't shout, you just endured. That kind of grace isn't weakness, it's power. It's what men like Derek can't understand. Her throat tightened. I don't feel powerful. Not yet, Julian said softly. But you will. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small business card. The paper was black, minimalist, M, bossed with his name in silver. Beneath it, a line of text in elegant italics, stars cannot shine without darkness. He slid it across the table. That quote saved me once. Maybe it'll help you too. Olivia ran her fingers over the card. The words felt heavy with meaning, as though they carried a secret she wasn't ready to understand. Then the door of the cafe burst open. A man in a black coat hurried in, shaking off the rain. His presence immediately drew attention, not from his appearance, but from the tension radiating off him. He scanned the cafe, eyes landing on Julian. Sir, he said, approaching quickly, we have a problem. Julian's expression shifted, calm but alert. Thomas, he greeted him. This is Olivia Carter. Thomas nodded briefly, then lowered his voice. The Ashfords are already spinning a story. They're calling it an assault. Videos of the kiss are going viral. Rebecca's statement claims you forced yourself on Derek's ex-fiancé during a moment of intoxication. They're framing it as scandalous, predatory. Olivia's blood ran cold. What? Julian's jaw clenched. Of course they are. Thomas continued grimly. They're threatening to sue, claiming emotional distress and reputational damage. The media's eating it up. We need to act fast before this escalates. For a moment, Julian didn't move. Then he exhaled, a slow, controlled breath that carried the weight of someone who'd been here before. Let them talk, he said finally. Truth has a way of cutting through noise. Thomas frowned. And if it doesn't? Julian's gaze shifted to Olivia. Then we'll show them the difference between power built on fear and power built on truth. Olivia's chest tightened. She hadn't asked for this war, but she suddenly knew she was part of it now. The kiss that had been her salvation was about to become ammunition for the Ashfords' revenge. Julian turned to her, his voice gentler again. I won't let them drag you through this alone. She searched his eyes, seeing both the storm and the... He promised there. Why are you doing this for me? He hesitated, just long enough for her to see that the answer came from somewhere deep, raw, and unguarded. Because I remember what it feels like when no one did it for me. The rain outside finally stopped. The silence in the cafe was thick, heavy with things neither of them dared say aloud. Olivia reached for the card again, tracing the silver letters. Stars cannot shine without darkness. She didn't know it yet, but this night, the night she was humiliated, rescued, and now hunted, was not an ending. It was the beginning of her awakening. And for the first time, she understood. Sometimes the storm doesn't destroy you. Sometimes it reveals who you truly are. The morning after the gala broke heavy and gray, like the world itself had not yet decided whose side it was on. The storm had passed, but its memory lingered, wet streets glistening like silver ribbons under a pale sky. In Olivia Carter's small apartment, the quiet was deceptive. Her phone had been buzzing since dawn. News alerts, missed calls, messages from friends she hadn't heard from in years. She sat at the edge of her bed, her bare feet brushing against the cold wooden floor, scrolling through headlines that made her chest tighten. Tech billionaire Julian Harrington sparks scandal at Ashford Gala, passion or provocation? Olivia Carter, the ex-fiancé who started a war. Ashford family calls for legal action after assault at society event. The world had chosen sides overnight, and Olivia's name, once meaningless beyond charity newsletters and art supply stores, was now plastered across gossip columns like a brand. Her phone buzzed again, a message from Nina Rodriguez, her best friend since college. "Are you okay? Don't look at the news, just call me." Olivia exhaled shakily, setting the phone down. The air in the room felt too small, too tight. She glanced at the painting she'd been working on before all this began, a sky of unfinished stars. It felt mocking now, the irony of it all. A knock at her door startled her. She hesitated, every instinct on edge, but when she opened it, Julian Harrington stood there. No security detail, no entourage, just him. His black coat was damp from the drizzle, his eyes tired but resolute. "May I come in?" he asked quietly. Olivia stepped aside wordlessly. He entered the modest space, looking almost out of place against her cluttered art supplies and half-dried canvases. Yet there was no judgment in his gaze, only exhaustion and purpose. "I assume you've seen it," he said, nodding toward her phone on the bed. She laughed softly, the sound brittle. "I think the whole planet's seen it." Julian's expression darkened. Rebecca Ashford wasted no time. Her lawyers are framing last night as a public assault and reputational ambush. She's demanding a press conference and threatening to file charges. Olivia blinked, stunned. "Charges? Against you?" "And you," Julian said evenly. "They're claiming it was orchestrated, that you and I conspired to humiliate Derek in front of investors to sabotage their new venture." Olivia's stomach dropped. "That's insane." "Yes," Julian said, but it doesn't have to be true. It just has to be loud." She sank onto the couch, her pulse pounding. "They're going to destroy me, aren't they?" Julian crouched in front of her, meeting her eyes. "They're going to try, but they don't understand something." "What's that?" He gave a faint, almost dangerous smile. "I don't scare easily." Before she could respond, his phone vibrated. He answered quickly and his tone shifted, professional, sharp. "Thomas?" "Yes, I'm with her now." "They leaked the footage already?" "Understood. Hold the statement until I call." When he hung up, Olivia stared at him, tension thick between them. "You're fighting a war because of me." Julian shook his head. "No, I'm fighting a war because people like Derek and Rebecca Ashford think they can humiliate, exploit, and walk away untouched. You just gave them the perfect stage, and me, the perfect reason." A long silence stretched. Outside, a siren wailed in the distance. Olivia finally whispered, "So what happens now?" Julian straightened, his voice calm but laced with steel. "Now, we take control of the story." He walked to her small desk and pulled out a notepad. His movements were methodical, almost military. "You'll get a call from a journalist soon. Vanessa Chen, investigative reporter for the Ledger. She's been following the Ashfords for months. She suspects financial misconduct and offshore laundering through their foundation." Olivia frowned. "How do you know her?" "I fund her work anonymously," Julian said. "People like her are rare, unbought and relentless. She'll protect the truth." "But if I speak to her," Olivia said, voice trembling, "I'll become the story." Julian looked at her, and his words came like a vow. "Then we'll make sure your story ends with power, not pity." By evening, Olivia found herself sitting across from Vanessa Chen in a quiet downtown cafe. The journalist was sharp-eyed, quick-thinking, her recorder already running. "Off the record," Vanessa began, "did you and Julian Harrington plan that kiss?" Olivia almost laughed. "Do people plan humiliation?" Vanessa leaned forward. "You'd be surprised what people plan when power's involved." Olivia met her gaze steadily. "No, we didn't plan anything. He didn't even know me before last night." Vanessa's pen scratched across her notebook. "Then why did he defend you?" Olivia hesitated, her mind replaying that moment. Derek's cruel words, Julian's voice cutting through the noise like thunder, and that kiss that felt like defiance incarnate. "Because," Olivia said softly, "he recognized what it feels like to be small in a room full of people who enjoy it." Vanessa's pen stopped. She looked up, her expression shifting from professional curiosity to something close to respect. "That's a hell of a line," she said quietly. "Mind if I quote you?" Olivia smiled faintly. "Only if you spell my name right." By the time Julian returned that night, Vanessa's article was already spreading across the internet. Ashford scandal, billionaire's kiss exposes culture of cruelty in high society. Not everyone who looks powerful is. Sometimes true power is the courage to stand up in a room that thrives on silence. Olivia Carter. Julian placed his phone on her counter, his expression unreadable. It's everywhere, he said, and it's working. Public opinion is turning. Olivia stared at the headline, her heart pounding. I didn't mean to become this. He smiled faintly. Neither did I. But sometimes, the moment chooses you. The tension between them softened, replaced by something quieter, deeper. He looked around her apartment, at the paintings stacked against the wall, the colors that seemed to pulse with life even in shadow. You should show these, he said. They're beautiful. Olivia laughed softly. You really think people want to see the art of a woman the tabloids just called a scandal? Julian stepped closer. Yes, because you're not a scandal. You're a symbol of what happens when someone refuses to stay broken. Their eyes met, the air thick with everything unspoken. Gratitude, admiration, and a spark neither could deny anymore. Olivia exhaled, her voice barely above a whisper. What if the Ashfords fight back? Julian's gaze hardened. Then they'll learn what it feels like to lose everything they thought was untouchable. And though she didn't know it yet, he meant it, because by dawn Julian Harrington would launch a full investigation into the Ashford empire, one that would shake the foundation of their fortune and expose every lie they'd ever buried. The battle lines had been drawn. The woman they tried to humiliate was no longer their victim. She was their reckoning, and standing beside her was the one man powerful enough to turn their darkness into her light. The night of reckoning came wrapped in quiet thunder. The city skyline shimmered beneath a gauze of rain, skyscrapers glowing like watchful sentinels as the world held its breath. In a corner of the Whitestone Art Gallery, Olivia Carter stood beneath a vast skylight, her reflection mirrored in the polished floors below. She wore black, elegant, understated, her only jewelry the star sapphire promise ring glinting faintly beneath the gallery lights. This was the night her first solo exhibition opened, the night her name, once dragged through the mud, now drew crowds that stretched around the block. But beneath the applause, the scent of champagne, and the clicking of cameras, a current of tension hummed through the air. The Ashfords had not gone quietly. Earlier that morning, Julian Harrington's office looked like the calm before a storm. Glass walls, city view, and the hum of power in every corner. His assistant, Thomas Chen, entered holding a sleek tablet. It's done, Thomas said. Vanessa Chen's investigation dropped an hour ago. Offshore accounts, shell corporations, falsified charity records, everything. Julian glanced up. And the verification? Rock solid, documents, witnesses, digital trails. Rebecca Ashford can't bury this one. Julian leaned back, his expression unreadable. Then let her drown in it. Thomas hesitated. You sure you want this public today of all days? Julian's gaze shifted to the rain streaking down the window. She tried to destroy Olivia. She thought she was untouchable. Today, the world will learn she's not. At 6 p.m., the headlines detonated like firecrackers across every screen. Ashford dynasty crumbles. Federal investigation launched into decades of fraud. Rebecca Ashford faces arrest as evidence mounts. Olivia Carter, from scandal to symbol of courage. Within an hour, the same society columnists who once mocked her were now calling her a quiet force of integrity. But Olivia hadn't come for revenge. She'd come for closure. And as the evening crowd filled the gallery, collectors, journalists, art critics, she smiled politely, accepted compliments, and ignored the tremor in her hands. Because she knew Derek would come. He always did when he was cornered. The sound of rain intensified outside as the doors swung open. A hush rippled through the room. Derek Ashford stood there, disheveled, rain-soaked, eyes rimmed red. Gone was the arrogance that once wrapped him like armor. In its place was desperation, brittle and dangerous. Olivia froze. Even after everything, seeing him again felt like touching an old wound. Olivia, he said, voice rough, too loud for the quiet space. We need to Julian appeared at her side almost instantly, calm and composed but unmistakably protective. This isn't the place, Derek. Derek's gaze flicked to Julian, hatred flashing like lightning. Of course you'd say that. The White Knight saving the girl he doesn't even know. Olivia's voice was steady, though her heart raced. You should leave. He ignored her. Do you think this fixes anything? That some bleeding heart journalist and a billionaire with a savior complex make you pure again? Julian took a slow step forward, his voice low and lethal. Careful. But Olivia raised a hand, stopping him. Her eyes, once filled with fear, now burned with something far stronger. No, Julian, she said softly. Let him speak. Derek's voice broke into bitter laughter. You humiliated me, you and your champion. My family's in ruins because of you. Olivia shook her head. Your family's in ruins because of what they did. You just finally got caught standing beside them. Her words landed like a verdict. The crowd that had gathered behind them fell silent. Somewhere a camera clicked. Derek took a step closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. I loved you once. Olivia met his gaze. No, you loved control. You loved being adored. You never loved me. He flinched as if she'd struck him. For the first time, she saw not the villain who broke her, but a man hollowed out by his own vanity. I didn't want this, he murmured. I know, she said quietly. But you made it happen anyway. Security moved subtly closer. Derek's shoulders slumped, his fury dissolving into shame. Without another word, he turned and walked out into the rain. The door swung shut behind him, leaving a vacuum of silence. Julian exhaled slowly. You handled that better than I would have. Olivia smiled faintly. That's because I wasn't fighting him anymore. I was freeing myself. Later that night, the gallery lights dimmed as the final guests drifted out. Only Olivia and Julian remained standing before the centerpiece painting, a vast canvas of a midnight sky where every star burned brighter against the darkness. The night I stood still, Julian read from the small plaque beneath it. That's what you named it? Olivia nodded. The night he tried to break me. The night you stood up for me. Julian smiled softly. You didn't need saving. You just needed reminding. She turned toward him, emotions shimmering in her eyes. And what about you? You risked everything for me. He shook his head. No, Olivia, I did it for what you represent. The courage to stand when the world expects you to fall. You reminded me what integrity looks like. The rain had stopped outside, leaving the streets glistening with reflected light. Julian reached into his pocket and withdrew a small velvet box, the same one from months ago, only now it no longer symbolized hesitation. He opened it, revealing the same star sapphire ring that had never lost its gleam. Olivia's breath caught. This isn't about promises anymore, he said softly. It's about truth. You've rebuilt yourself from ashes. You've faced every shadow they cast. You're no longer a story they wrote. You're the author now. Her hand trembled slightly as he slid the ring back onto her finger. Julian. He smiled, his voice low. You once told me stars can't shine without darkness. You were right. But what you forgot to add was, when they finally shine, the darkness remembers their light forever. She blinked back tears, laughing softly. That's beautiful. He leaned in, his forehead resting gently against hers. So are you. And when he kissed her, this time, there were no cameras, no gasps, no scandal, only two souls that had found their way through ruin to something resembling peace. Outside, dawn began to break, scattering gold across the horizon. Olivia turned back to her painting one last time. Each star gleamed brighter than she remembered, fierce, defiant, eternal. Do you know what's funny? She murmured. Julian looked at her curiously. What? If Derek hadn't humiliated me that night, she said, smiling faintly, I never would have found you, never would have found myself. Julian took her hand, their fingers intertwining. Sometimes the worst nights give birth to the brightest mornings. As they stepped out into the new light, the city beginning to stir around them, Olivia Carter felt something she hadn't felt in years. Not victory, not vengeance, but freedom. The woman they tried to shame had become the woman they could never forget. And somewhere in the fading echoes of her past, the darkness that once mocked her bowed quietly because she had learned to shine without permission.